So this fall, what I want you to do is I want you to vote for no more 2020. Does anybody else want to vote for the same thing, 2020? Let's just be over with this and move on. Come on, be honest about this. Yeah. Well, let's just think about what has happened all in 2020, right? So first, we've got politics, right? We've got all of the crazy politics that we've been dealing with in 2020. And then there was fires in Australia. Did anybody remember that? That was actually in 2020. It seems like forever ago. And then there was fires in California. They're still going on. And then murder hornets. Hey, look at that. Does anybody remember murder hornets? Yeah? I don't know what happened to them. Maybe they locked them all up or something. I don't know. And then there was swarms of locusts. You heard about this? They were talking about biblical plagues and swarms of locusts. Well, and I haven't even gotten to COVID. That's all that stuff that happened sort of before COVID. And COVID has brought us, remember they said, well, you better stock up with some food, right? So then all of a sudden the shelves were empty. And then they said, well, we better quarantine for a while. So then we're all sort of, at home. And when you're in quarantine, there's travel restrictions. You can't go anyplace. And then you're trying to work from home, right? Who is still working from home or has done working from home? Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Well, and then if you try school from home, and I don't know if you know this, but school from home and working from home don't work together. No, that's definitely a no-no. And then there's kind of the sports and the concerts and the movies that were all canceled. I don't know. I'm going to set up a major alarm right now because Black Widow and the new James Bond movie have been pushed back a whole year. I mean, this is an emergency, I think. Okay, just for me, maybe. No other James Bond fans in the crowd? All right, thank you for that piddly, yeah, okay, that's good. But then vacations were canceled. We were trying to go somewhere this summer, and it just didn't happen. And then don't get me started about toilet paper. Now, I need to come over to each one of your houses because one of you has like 1,000 rolls of toilet paper in your house right now. And I don't know who that is, but we're short. So I'm coming over, all right? Let's talk afterwards. So 2020 has been stressful. Wouldn't you agree? It's been stressful for us, and I'm thinking you too. Just this year, we've tried to, amidst all of that craziness, we've had to move my mom into an assisted living place. We've tried to salvage what was left of my daughter's senior year in high school. We tried to move her into college and get her settled. We've dealt with stress of working from home, school from home, and all of that stress that comes with it. And so what I try and do sometimes is think back to the good times before this all sort of, came off the rails, right? So you think about, we used to have family reunions that we would hang out with, and there was parties, and there was experiences. We got to go to trips. Theme parks were open. There was all sorts of things that one could do to enjoy that time. And it's tougher now, right? And as I look back on all that mess, before all of this mess, and I think to myself, maybe I'm looking back with rose-colored glasses, though. So if I'm honest, we had a lot of that busyness to just sort of fill a void that we had. There was something that we were trying to fill that we just couldn't put our finger on. Deep down, there was something discontent, something that just sort of like, if we just keep on going, and with all of that busyness, we sort of cover it. But then when all of this stuff kind of upended in life in 2020 happened, it just becomes more and more prevalent, right? It becomes so easy to see that something's just not quite right. Well, did you know, it's not just me that feels that way. Did you know alcohol sales have gone through the roof this year? People are trying to fill that with something. And it seems like everybody's got something, maybe a miracle product, maybe a book that you could read that would solve your life, maybe some vitamins that pack all of your essential daily, minerals and vegetables and everything into a little capsule, something to help you fill that void. Well, several years ago, I took a trip to Washington, D.C., and we went out onto the mall, and, you got to sightsee when you're there. And we were checking out the Lincoln Memorial, and there was this guy that was standing up on a platform in the Lincoln Memorial. And he was screaming at the top of his lungs, "Jesus is the way. You need Jesus. You need to repent and believe." And I thought to myself, first of all, God, that's hard on your voice, man. Do you need some water or something? But second, I thought, well, that guy is sold out for his product, right? He's obviously all in on this. But I'm thinking his marketing strategy probably leaves a little something to be desired. So today we're going to talk about who Jesus is and why I think he will fill that void that you have, that void that maybe you just haven't put your finger on yet. Now, to be super clear, I am a follower of Jesus, and I believe that he is the answer, and a relationship with him will do that. And if you're here, chances are you probably think that too, or maybe you're not quite sure. Maybe you're not quite all in. But if you're joining us online, maybe you don't feel the same way, but let's just walk through a little bit of that today. And I'm not going to scream at you, well, intentionally anyways. I'm not going to scream at you. In fact, I'm not even going to try and convince you, because I believe the evidence itself is convincing enough. All I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the evidence, and I want you to do your own research. So we're going to ask that question, who is Jesus? Did you know this is the most known name in history? Jesus. I mean, currently there are 2.3 billion people on earth that consider themselves follower of this man. And that's for 2,000 years they've been followers of Christ. It's more named than anyone else in the world. He's the most famous person in the world. In fact, countless people have martyred themselves. They have given their lives instead of renouncing faith in him. So who is this Jesus anyways? Well, I mean, maybe you're going to start off with the basic question like, well, did he even live? All right? I mean, it was 2,000 years ago. They didn't have Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok back then, so it was a little harder to document things, right? So maybe he was just sort of a local legend that got bigger. You know, like Paul Bunyan or Babe and the Blue Ox. Maybe he's just a famous type of person, and then it became something more than it was. So maybe he really wasn't there. But the truth is, and the Alpha class will go into this a lot deeper, so if you're doing Alpha, do your diligence and find this out for yourself. But the truth is there's more historical evidence that Jesus lived than just about anybody else of that time. Even people that we take for granted, you know, like Socrates and Aristotle, and we don't question that, but there's more evidence that Jesus actually walked the earth. So grant me that for the sake of this discussion, that, okay, Mark, he lived. I'll give you that. But, you know, maybe he was just a good teacher. Because I hear that a lot, you know. Well, he was a good teacher, okay? Well, that's true. He was a good teacher. I mean, a lot of the things that he said formed the ethical foundation for our culture that we live in right now. You know, love others as you love yourself. Some of these basic foundations have formed Western society. So was he a good teacher? Yeah. Well, but maybe so was Dr. Seuss. So, you know, when I graduated high school, Oh, the Places You Go got me through some hard times, I'm telling you. Anybody else read Oh, the Places You Go? You guys are kind of quiet today. You're wearing masks, I realize, but your mouth still works, so that's okay. But Dr. Seuss taught me two things: to keep on going and not to eat green eggs and ham. So I don't recommend that for you either. So he was a good teacher. But, you know, maybe he didn't actually claim to be God when he was on earth. Maybe his followers just did that to kind of, you know, prop him up a little bit. So did he actually claim to be God? That's the next question that sort of kind of comes up. You know, I grant that he's a good teacher, but did he claim to be God? Well, we're going to dive into the scriptures a little bit to talk about that. But we're not actually going to start with Jesus. We're going to start back in Exodus a little bit before that. And Exodus is one of the first books of the Bible, and it gives the story of Moses freeing the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. And at the beginning of the story, we're going to find that God is coming to Moses to tell him that he's got a mission for him, something for him to do. He's going to tell him that I want you to come and get these Israelites out of slavery. And so, first of all, God appears to Moses in this burning bush, and he tells him this. And Moses is thinking to himself, okay, I see you want me to do this, but I'm just a guy, and I'm going to need a little bit more weight behind me, right? So he says to him, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Well, that sort of makes sense. He's saying, if I go in front of these people and I say, God sent me, they're going to ask, how do we know? What proof do we have that God actually sent you? So he said, hey, who should I say sent me? And so God responds to him with, I am who I am. And, modern readers, we might read this and we might go, I am who I am. But it almost sounds sort of sarcastic, doesn't it? He says, say to the people of Israel, I am has sent you. Well, I don't think he's actually being sarcastic here. I mean, he's an eternal God. So I am makes sense. It's the sense of being of God, right? He's not I was or I will be, but sort of I am. He always is. I am. So then, it does seem like a kind of an odd statement, doesn't it? So what happens then? Maybe it's just a one-off thing. Well, God continues, and he says to Moses, this is my name forever, and thus I'm to be remembered throughout all the generations. Which is interesting, right? So it's not just a sort of a one-off. This is my name, and I want you to sort of continue to remember this throughout all the generations. This is sort of a big deal to say that. I don't say to my kids, hey, take out the garbage on Tuesday nights. Remember this throughout all of the generations. They still would forget, but that's okay. So remember my name. So I am is actually what God wanted the Israelites to refer to them. And they did remember that all the way through all the generations. So now we can skip ahead to talk about Jesus. Because Jesus is in that culture where I am is God's name. I am has sent me to you. So the next thing we see is Jesus talking with the Jews. And the Jews are not happy with Jesus at this point. He's been an irritation. He's causing them, he's questioning their teaching. He's causing all sorts of problems for them. And he's gaining a lot of notoriety around there. And so they want to corner him. So they say to him, hey, we know that you have a demon. Now, this doesn't really start well, does it? If somebody walked up to you and said, hey, I know that you have a demon, I would put me on my defensive, right? Back on my heels. What's this guy about to do? He says, Abraham died, as did the prophets, and yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham who died, and the prophets who died? Who do you make yourself out to be? That's kind of a big deal there, right? Hey, Abraham died, you say that you can prevent death. Who do you think you are? They're trying to corner him with his own words. And so Jesus responds, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Now, if you're just reading this and you don't know that context, maybe you'd miss that. But I've bolded it for a reason. He says, I am. He specifically says that for a reason. He's saying to them, I am God. And if you're wondering, okay, maybe that's just your modern reading of it, Mark, rather than what it said in the scripture. No, the very next line says, they picked up their stones to throw at him. Now, why on earth would they pick up their stones to throw at him? Well, because if you claim to be God, that was a sin punishable by death. So they knew exactly what he was saying, and immediately it caused a visceral reaction for them to just pick up stones and ready to throw at him. But Jesus snuck out. So, did he claim to be God? Yeah, very clearly. And you can see the reaction right away. So, he didn't claim to just be a good teacher. He himself claimed to be God. He said, I am. He didn't hold back. He went full bore and said, I am. That's what got Jesus killed. So they don't go around sort of killing good teachers. But if you claim to be God, well, going to get on somebody's radar real quick. So let me just review so far what we've been talking about, right? So did he actually live? Yes, there's a lot of historical evidence for that. Was he a good teacher? Yeah, no doubt about that. He was a good teacher. But he also claimed to be God. And that's what got him killed. It got the leaders so angry that they had him killed. So at this point, you're left with a couple of options, I think, on who Jesus is. Because either he's a liar, right? And he was trying to get some attention. He was trying to reach out, and he was trying to bolster himself, and he was lying. Or maybe he was crazy. And I don't mean like, hey, I'm crazy for pizza, but like, hey, I'm a teapot kind of crazy. So either if he was a liar or if he was crazy, then Jesus might just have been a footnote in history, right? Because believe it or not, there have been a lot of people to claim to be God along the way, and we don't remember them. They aren't the most famous name in history. So is there any more options? Well, I think there's a third option. What if he's telling the truth? Now, grant me this for a reason, or a second here. What kind of evidence would there be for him to tell the truth? Well, if you remember, he said, I will die, and in 3 days I will rise again. So if he actually died and was resurrected, that would be pretty good claim for his truth, wouldn't it? That would be pretty good evidence. So let's think about that for a second. So maybe his followers just sort of said, oh, yep, he was resurrected, right? No doubt about that. Just like trying to bolster their own argument. And if they did do that, they did a pretty poor job of it, right? So the first people that they talk about seeing Jesus were women. And we live in a much different culture than they did back then. Women back then were not considered reliable witnesses. And yet the Bible unapologetically says the women saw him first. So that's the one strike against them. And then it says he appeared to the disciples and to 500 other people. Well, that could be crowds. They could have seen something. But I think the biggest evidence for me is in the outcome. So you look at his disciples right after his death. They were hiding in the upper room. They were all kind of cowered together, worried about their own lives. They had just seen Jesus brutally murdered on a cross, thinking to themselves, I want none of that. But then something happens to them. If they did truly see Jesus after the resurrection, it changed them. It changed them so dramatically that they became fearless, that they spread the seeds of the church throughout the whole community, that persecution could not stop them, that nothing could stop them, until they were eventually, most of them, martyred. Something changed them. That seems like really good evidence to me that Jesus was resurrected. Why else would they be so sold in when just earlier they were cowering and hiding? It's not like they drank a bunch of Red Bulls and said, okay, let's just do this. They didn't have Red Bulls at the time. So if he's telling the truth, and we all know how sort of ugly 2020 has been. If he's telling the truth, then the things that he said should have some weight. Like if he really was God, then the things that he said should probably hold a little bit of weight and might mean something for us. And if you've had a year like we've had, and I suspect you have, then the words that Jesus said, some of the words that Jesus said could make a big difference in your life. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. How many of us couldn't use some rest now? And then he also said, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. What is he promising here? He's saying that he came so that that void that we feel has a solution. It's a relationship with Jesus. It's a relationship with that holy God. Now, if he wasn't resurrected, then why don't you read some of the teaching like you would watch a TED Talk and just move on, like, oh, I read a good book for work and I gathered 4 points and I move on. And then we could all go home and sleep in this morning. But if he was resurrected, and it is true, then that void that you're searching for has a solution. Now, you might be a skeptic about this, or you might sort of like, I don't know, Mark, I come to church, but it's not a big deal for me. But I challenge you to look into this yourself. Check out the evidence. Don't take my word for this. Because if the man was resurrected, then the stuff that he says and he claims is from God. It could be a game changer for you. It could be a game changer for me. I believe that he was risen from the dead. And I believe that he has some amazing news for you and me, a promise of a relationship with the living God, a promise of life eternal after this life. That's some pretty amazing news. And I want that for you, and I want that for me.